as we are going to talk about that energy that literally keeps us all alive, right? We wouldn't be here, pets and plants wouldn't be here if we weren't being powered by this thing called redox. This is like the alert system for the human body. And I just want to set some ideas really first off on what is health. You know, if the wrinkles that we look at on the left-hand side of the screen and they appear as the reflection of what's going on the inside of the body, does that actually mean that if we don't have wrinkles, we're healthy? Yeah, that's an interesting thought. But like a car dashboard, for example, if the warning lights aren't on, is everything good? You know, do you operate that way with your car? Do you just wait until you have a warning light pop up, or do you do some maintenance, that prevention? You know, in the body, the warning lights are the symptoms. And if we leave those untouched, just like our cars, we're going to have problems. But for the human body, that becomes a disease. And so we have to think about the fact that just because we don't have a symptom, does that also mean we're healthy? Well, you know, the health of the body is actually all based around this thing called redox homeostasis. What does that mean? It really just means this balance, this balancing act between these two things, oxidants and reductants. Oxidants are those things that cause us to create inflammation if it's allowed to get out of control. And reductants are like the control mechanism. But this is how we control damaged cells, by sending signals and actually sending a repair crew in to solve the problem. That's what we all think of as healing. Now, redox itself actually affects not simply every action in the body. There is nothing that takes place without a redox signal having called something into action. But it does some really important things. It affects the way our gene regulation takes place. What's our genes? Well, the genes are the method in the way the body talks about our DNA and makes sure that our cells produce healthy cells and replicate the right way. If you know people who've got challenges that run through the history of their family from generation to generation, it means that that cellular communication at a gene level is not working correctly. It protects our cells, the healthy cells, and it protects the natural lifespan of a healthy cell. That's a good thing. And then when we have a problem, it's going to come in with the fire crew or the ambulance, so to speak, and it's actually going to repair or replace and recover the challenges that we have from damaged cells. That might be from trauma because you've injured yourself, but it could also definitely be because a cell is aging and it needs replacing, or perhaps it's sick and it definitely needs to be replaced. And one of the, possibly the most important thing that we can think of currently in the last 2 years is adaptive response, our immune system defense. In other words, the police that are kind of on alert for what are those bacteria and viruses and environmental toxins that are going to attack us and cause problems. And so they move in and they work out how to defend us. So you want those to be pretty strong. Now, when this supply and demand process between damaged cells being either repaired or replaced stays in balance, we manage to keep pretty healthy, energetic, and looking and feeling pretty amazing. And when we're young, that supply of those antioxidants, the reductants, can certainly meet the demand for damaged cells calling for a need for support. And so, you know, we all know this when we look at young kids or people who are much younger than we are. They look amazing because their skin is healing pretty fast, turning over much faster than ours. You know, they're energetic. If they fall over, they bounce back up like a bouncy ball. They don't get pains like we do as we get older, and they certainly don't ache, and they have great sleep, and just they basically look and feel good. And I think that's often what we would wish we could stay that way, right through to the end of our life, that we didn't see any changes, we just lived our life out. But the imbalance that's going on below the surface actually begins in puberty. So this redox begins to slow down by 1% per year around mid-teens. Well, you know, by the time we're 35, there's a tipping point that's happened below the surface. I think we'd all agree that in our 20s and probably early 30s, we don't really think that there's much change taking place. We don't notice that there's really any significant slowing down. But there's this tipping point. That 35 point is like the midpoint when things begin to change, because it's been accumulating under the surface. And science actually talks about the fact that we're likely to spend the rest of our time from from 35 onwards, struggling to try to maintain or achieve that balance that we had when we were young, because inevitable decline is going to go in earnest. There's nothing we can do about stopping that in general way, but we are going to show you how we can interrupt it, and that's a really important thing. So how do we know that the supply and the demand are out of balance in the body? Well, because the symptoms begin to increase, right? And that's when the damage begins to get out of control, and that happens a lot when we get older in particular, and we're much more prone to disease. Sadly, we do see a lot of younger people beginning to experience diseases that traditionally we wouldn't have seen until we were in our late 60s and 70s. And the balance of redox begins to diminish at 10% per decade. And really, like the charge in the cells of those batteries, the cells in our body are exactly the same. They're electrical, and we really need them to be fully charged if we want to be fully operative. And so as they begin to slow down, that healing slows down and the symptoms begin to appear. And steadily, we're kind of losing the war that we know of as aging. Now, inflammation, that we're all familiar with that word, begins to overwhelm the body because the supply of antioxidants just can't keep up with the demand that is triggered because of damaged cells, aging cells, stress-related damage, and all of those challenges as we're getting older. And research actually tells us, interestingly, that 8 years before someone will diagnose us with something that has a name to it, the cells related to that issue have actually already begun to experience damage. So the purpose of just referencing that is to understand that illness didn't turn up today. And so if you have something that someone said you've got X, right, it didn't just happen in the last week, it didn't happen in the month, and maybe even in the year before. It's been a progressive problem. Now, in the 70s, the science that's actually identified these cellular signals that are being essential for life was finally given a Nobel Prize to these 3 scientists who identified and named the very first redox signaling molecule, which is nitric oxide, and its benefit for cardiovascular health. That's just one of multiple redox signaling molecules, and you may well begin to hear a lot more about nitric oxide on the market, because generally science is beginning to adopt these principles of redox, but until now, no one has managed to do what we've done, and we're going to talk about the complete balance of redox and its importance. But that science that began way back there in the late 90s is why we have so much information on what redox signals do. Redox is actually shared in annual conferences in Paris, France, by scientists who come from around the world. You can see just a smattering of the universities in the United States that have not simply research involvement, but complete departments that they're now actually dedicating just to redox science, because this is where medicine is moving. And for those of you who want a deeper dive, take a look at all the references we have there. If you're going to look at Google, just make sure that you do Scholar Google or Google Scholar, because that's where redox research is going to be. And all of the non-peer-reviewed published studies are there, and they're in the millions, which might give you a hint as just to how significant this is. Don't go to Google, because that is just a search engine. It's not a research engine. You'll just find a lot of public opinion. I read them myself, and there's a lot of misunderstanding because people just judge things by old ideas and then they apply them to current new things that are coming in front of them, and they actually are a lot of misleading information. Scientists have shown us that using the saline inside the cells, and if you think about this, if you go to the hospital and you've got a problem, most likely they're going to hook you up to a saline solution. Why? Because that's what we're made of, right? If you cry, you know that you've got the salt from your tears. If you sweat, you know that that's what it tastes like. This mildly salty solution is what we're made up of. And the mitochondria uses that to produce this thing called ATP, which is the energy for the metabolism of every single cell. And these 2 significant things, reductants and oxidants. And this is where this essential cell signaling function is taking place. Now, redox molecules themselves since the 90s have been generated in small machines. And so that's why we have over 30 years of research. about the knowledge of how essential they are to the body. The scientific challenge has always been, how do you stabilize something that really only has a lifespan of about 10 to 30 minutes? And that's what those machines would produce. So in 2007, a group of scientists were tasked with taking 10 years of previously patented technology and research and propelling this into a space where they did what was considered scientifically impossible. They stabilized these bioactive molecules outside of the human body and gave them at that point, back in 2007, a lifespan of 12 months. Currently, we have them at about 21 months of lifespan because our technology has advanced in the last 11 years. But that became a game changer. That became suddenly where you can come out of research with its limits of having to be in front of that little machine in order to drink the molecules, and now suddenly have this opportunity where we don't have to be part of a scientific research project to benefit from being able to rebuild these essential cell signaling functions. Lynn will talk a little bit about those two references at the bottom, the ASEA Genesis story at amazingmolecules.com. ASEA's Redox is a patented breakthrough. Now, the body produces these signals in under a nanosecond. We're not that smart. It takes us 3.5 days to replicate what the cells do endlessly 24/7. And it is a process, what you're looking at in that FDA-approved facility is how they move this saline solution through different tanks, and they adjust the pH, and they put electrical processing through it to actually break the bonds of the sodium chloride, hydrogen, oxygen, commonly known as salt water. Don't be confused, it's not your table salt. You can't go make it in your kitchen. And at the end of it, with the brilliance of the science that they have, they're able to dial in and measure the level of activity to a very specific frequency. And that once it reaches that, they lock it off and stabilize it. And now we have this incredible product that is available to you, me, and everybody around 33 countries. It ships from this facility to the 33 countries, and this is the only plant that makes it because we have its patented, proprietary, and nobody can reverse engineer what we have because it's not about ingredients. And that's probably hard because we're so used to looking at supplements with ingredients in there like vitamin C, vitamin B, and foods and things like that. And so we think that this is about ingredients, and it will say sodium chloride and water, but it is actually electrical transformation. And at the end of it, there is a very little salt in there, no more than about the equivalent of a carrot's worth of sodium if you drink a daily amount of 4 ounces. And it is no longer salt and water, it is stabilized redox signaling molecules. We have rigorous third-party certifications. Not only do we have our own scientists on site and we're doing constant testing, but everything goes out to be third-party validated so that you and I know that we're not buying salt water, we're buying redox signaling molecules. And as the new bottles are going out, we're going to start to see the transition from the bioagilitics third-party certification that tests every batch to say that that's what we have in there, redox certification, to these new places that we partner with both in Spain and Germany, who are not simply validating research locations who will test the product and say, yes, it's redox signaling, but do their own independent redox science and studies. And they are actually going to be able to provide us with a lot more information about how important this is for human health, and will provide us with published studies. Now, we're coming a long way since 2016, when the Huffington Post featured and talked about ASEA. You can see the old bottles at that point. One of 5 changing emerging technologies that were going to shape our future, because we were able to insert healthy redox signaling molecules into our body and help us repair and replace aging cells. And I think if we know that we're all aging, as Lynn said, we're all a day older than yesterday and 7 days older than last week, and so on. So if we want to slow that process down, this is the way. This is the ability to stop thinking about symptoms and move into cells, which means every single cell of the human body, which means we can affect every organ. Now, redox is within every single cell. It's the conversation in the cells and between the cells, and therefore every condition that we think of is going to involve a cell. So whether that is because you have stiff joints that are challenged, whether you've got digestive problems, a cardiovascular challenge, it is all simply that we don't have good signaling in those cells in that area that have accumulated the damage long enough to become a problem. Double-blind clinical studies on our product show us a number of interesting things. For example, 100% of people drinking it actually have blood serum marker changes almost instantly. Does that mean we feel that? No, we don't. But what it does mean is that the moment we consume it, it's already working at a cellular level. It protects the oxidization of LDL and DNA. It also boosts our own internal production of antioxidants. This is the most powerful ones we could possibly take. Produced in every single cell, millions of them every second, and they are our natural internal fire and extinguishing process. We boost the glutathione, the master antioxidant, by 800% and superoxide dismutase by 500%. We also improve gene signaling in we as much as 20 to 31%. And this is a really interesting double-blind placebo-controlled study. It was an 8-week study done at Torrey Labs. They're genetic specialists. They found out some really interesting things, that when the test group took the ASEA, 100% of them had this uniform improvement in how their genetic signaling worked. It's kind of interesting to note that they were only 35. There's that tipping point, right? And in fact, they found through the analysis pre the study that their genes were already beginning to diminish in function and switch off from being as optimal as they needed to be healthy. And it changed these 5 areas: healthy immune response, inflammatory response, cardiovascular health, with vein elasticity, improved gut health and digestive enzyme production, helped hormone balance and modulate vitality and wellness. When we work epigenetically, this is the hallmark of the future, how we can biohack and really tune up and dial up how our body can perform at its peak. I'll just remind you there, if you hadn't noticed on the 3rd line, there was a 0% response to the placebo, which was saline. Might give you a hint that you can't get it in your kitchen. And I just want to show you the inflammatory signaling pathway. Why? Because those are 5 names, and to me as a practitioner, they hit everywhere that is going to affect all sorts of things. And so it's a really massive improvement. But just to show you that when we open one door, we've actually got this huge knock-on effect. Redox is like this massive signaling system, and it goes out and affects all sorts of things. So if you dial into what's in the blue, this kind of gives you a sense that if we can tune up and keep those pathways really operating efficiently and effectively, we can help the body improve that, what kind of mood we have. You know, this feel happy piece with pathway 1. If you have gut problems, you are going to have problems with pathway 1. They go hand in hand because that's where our serotonin is made. Being able to tune up how we keep our brain efficient and optimal, wouldn't that be important? You know, this is command central, right, for everything else. Sleep is essential to all of us, for everyone. Internal antioxidants I mentioned. You know, redox is very primordial. It kind of directs everything. So stem cells are controlled and instructed by redox. Thyroid signaling systems. I've seen lots of people who, with their doctors, support actually transition off their medication, and their whole health turns around when they add this piece in. We can't diagnose, treat, and cure, but it's interesting to watch a repeat process happen when people are in a certain category, and we make our own conclusions from that. And in the Lancet, diabetes has been well written by Dr. James Watson as being connected to a redox deficiency. We talked about at the very beginning, we have Olympic athletes, we have professional athletes using this, because down at Appalachian Human Performance Labs in North Carolina, they do a lot of testing on the importance and the impact of the redox signaling. Not simply the liquid, but also the gel. But what we see is a 29% increase in endurance and performance. That might tell you and indicate to you that it is churning out and charging up those cellular batteries to a much higher level so that they can do amazing things. But as Lynn mentioned, you can use this if you're a weekend warrior or you simply want to stay athletic. We all need energy to power our life, whatever that looks like. So if we can have more of it, what could that mean for your life if you feel like you're currently underpowered? It improves the way that the body is able to uptake the VO2, the oxygen in the body, and shifts metabolites. There's a lot of information, and there's a site for you to go take a look at if you want to understand more. But it really helps us, as it does them, to not hurt. If we use the gel and we use the liquid, there's lots of support for muscular comfort in intense activity. And this gel is why they love it. They apply it to all their major muscle groups, and it does phenomenal things. I will say it's actually a skincare product, which is really interesting, but you can see some of the results of the 28-day study. We have this faster skin cell renewal. It turns over faster. By the time we're 50, our skin cells have slowed down to about 90 days, and this brings it back to that 28-day period, hence why it's called Renew 28, and really impacts us. And of course, that's why we all love it for the anti-aging side of things, but it also improves blood flow, which is an important piece. And here are some of the clinical study photos, because we all love to see what happens, right? And you can really see changes in the tone and the elasticity of the skin, soothing those skin irritants that can start from the inside with excess inflammation, but also the fine lines and wrinkles that we build. But here's why the athletes use it, because it's a powerful tool for things that hurt. So if you haven't experienced this, this was the way that I validated this product technology for myself. I took this product into my office and I did exactly what we have on the screen there. I just asked anybody, do you have anything that hurts? Because I'm trying out a new product and I want you to give me some feedback. And if you use this, it's the same as the liquid. So we always shake it because it does kind of separate out when it sits for a while. But you'll see that it is totally clear. And that is a suspension of 2 times what we drink. It's twice as concentrated, has 2 inner ingredients in there. One is silica to suspend the liquid just enough to make it a topical application and not runny. And the other one is a little bit of magnesium to rebalance the pH because it becomes too alkaline when we concentrate the redox down. So that's phenomenal for a skincare product because you don't have anything that is, an untoward chemical that you'll probably see on every skincare product you've got sitting in your cupboard at the moment. So I would encourage you to rate whatever level of discomfort you have and then just apply it 3 times. This is our key, in 5 minutes. 3 times in 5 minutes. Wait 5 more minutes. And go back and check what you saw. Now, if you said to yourself, my hips are really hurting and this is a level 8, it's really bad. And maybe in 5 minutes, like my first patient, it went down to a 0. That was a pretty amazing shift, right? Maybe you've got congestion for your sinuses and you're feeling really stuffy and they hurt a great deal. Perhaps it's a 7 and it goes to a 3. In other words, what we're seeing is the body's taking up these signals and beginning to make changes. If it doesn't go away entirely, just understand it's a bit like a fire, right? If you have a big fire and you've got a small fire extinguisher, you might put some of it out, but you might not put the whole thing out. So just understand that, use whatever you need and just layer it again if it doesn't shift. Wait a little while to see what impact that had on the inflammation and just keep layering it until you get to the comfort level that you're looking at. But this is a pretty phenomenal way to be able to demonstrate very quickly in under 10 minutes that probably a large percentage of 10 people, if you were to put it on 10 friends, would have amazing outcomes. That was certainly the way it was for me. And I realized that I got something that was pretty significant there. Now, ASEA is not nutrition. The nutrition we get is from our diet and actually making up anything that's missing from supplementation with whole foods. So if you're taking lots of nutritional supplements and you're not where you want to get, I would suggest to you that is the materials, and you're probably missing the labor to make use of it. And that is where the redox fits, because redox signals are the labor. What I've seen is that everybody ends up needing less nutritional supplements, because we get better absorption. And today's food lacks so much that a lot of us are very conscious in being able to just plug in the things that we really feel we're missing, because our diets aren't broad enough and rotating enough. Our lifestyles are kind of crazy. The food that we have isn't always as nutritionally vibrant as it should be. And there's a lot of chemicals that we really don't want in there that cause a depletion. We have the complete cellular package to put together the labor and the delivery in these 4 products. Broadly speaking, they're going to provide you with the essential components and the complex nutrients we need to plug in and make up for what's not in our diet. Superfoods, land minerals, which are equally as important as sea minerals and have different functions, healthy oils, which are really essential, not only for hormonal function, but for our brain and our heart, and also enzymes to make sure that we're going to be able to absorb and digest those things that we're putting in us. With the exception of omega, which is made from fish, these are also vegan products. I'm not going to talk about them in any depth, but we do have complete PIP's product information sheets on them, and the person who invited you to the call can let you know about those. Now, if you fight fatigue or foggy thinking, or maybe a sense of being overwhelmed these days and anxious about life, powered by redox powders, which you're looking at there, can be mixed with water or other ingredients. They can be put in your smoothies, they can be drunk hot or cold, and these are a great way to deliver sustained energy, to provide clearer thinking through cognitive improvement, and to be able to reduce the stress by addressing the one through mind, so that we can be at our best. Now, what we've done here is that we're taking synergistic ingredients that are scientifically proven to power redox signals, and we tap in through cell membranes into one of the 5 major pathways of our health. And that creates balance in the cells, which allows our cells to kind of return to operating that inner doctor that really helps us keep healthy. Now, I will say that even though these are designed for immediate benefit and experience, energy is not a hypey energy. It's not going to push you up and drop you down, sustained. But the mind and the mood also are cumulative in their improvement for neurofunction, and over the long haul are going to have definite impact beyond simply the one moment. Now, groundbreaking research in the National Library of Medicine's antioxidant journal, based on redox and homeostasis and skin aging, is the basis of not simply our science, but what powers this new skincare line that we've produced. So Renew Advanced is clinically tested, and he has with all products with ASEA, you get a 30-day money-back guarantee. And this prepares our skin and primes and plumps and builds our skin beauty and skin health. This is not just superficial. We're going right down to the hypodermis at the bottom of the skin layer, changing the health. And if you see, there's a little hint there in what we're doing. We're powering through redox. And as you'll see from left to right, those containers get darker, and that is an indication of the intensity of redox that is in each of those products. So we're cleansing, toning, serum pumping, and then hydrating with the moisture, and all of it anchors around pure redox in the Renew 28. So we think of it as 1, 2, renew, and then we do 3, 4. And this has been a big breakthrough in science-based skincare that isn't available anywhere else. Now, do we replenish our body and pump up those cells and charge those batteries up, or are we having to wait a little longer because we're trying to replace damaged cells below the surface and wait to see the evidence of that change? So rebuilding our supply to meet our demand may show some quick signs of change. And so within a week, 15 to 20% of people will see something change. At a month, we move on to the 50 to 60. But the long-term repair process for bigger damaged cells may take us to 3 months and beyond before we're going to really see what's happening. It's happening below the surface. Remember, 100% shift in blood serum markers the moment we start drinking it. But each person's going to have their own unique story. So how much do you need? Well, redox signals themselves don't treat anything. Neither can we say that they diagnose or treat anything, but they simply allow us to power the cells to reestablish that inner doctor. And consistency for this is very much the key to rebuilding signaling within the cells until we can reactivate sufficient health again. So your quantities are going to vary, but we can definitely say the older you are and the sicker you are, the more it's going to take to recharge those cells. This is the downhill slope of aging, right? From the left to the right, we look better when we're younger, we feel better when we're younger, and everything kind of rolls away from us as we age. And we talked about the reasons why that's changing underneath the surface. But I want to show you that when we replenish redox, both internally and externally, on a daily basis, we can literally interrupt the breakdown of aging in those cells and turn the clock back. And here is a beautiful example. And the bottom line is that I have never worked with a product that literally could take somebody on the right at 84 years old and move them to 91. She's actually 92. We must update this photo and make her look at least 10 years younger. And this is the power of what we're doing when we get in behind and we stop thinking symptoms. And we start thinking cells, because that is like the unknown universe. We have no frontier barriers.